At my daughter's wedding, I was handed a paper badge that read Limited Access Guest. My wife whispered, "That means no plate." I looked over, walked to the gift table, retrieved my envelope with the $37,500 fund check, and said, "I think you won't need this anymore." My daughter ran after me, and my wife shouted, "Come back." But look, I'm not the kind of guy who gets all misty-eyed over weddings, but when it's your own daughter walking down the aisle, you make an exception. I actually ironed my tie that morning, not just ran it under the faucet and hoped for the best like I usually do, but broke out the actual ironing board that's been collecting dust in the hall closet since 2019. I even practiced my proud father smile in the bathroom mirror, which, let me tell you, felt ridiculous at the time but seemed necessary. This was Lily's big day, and I was determined not to screw it up by looking like I'd just rolled out of a dumpster behind a 7-Eleven. The ceremony itself was beautiful, I'll give them that. The venue was one of those places that charges you $3,000 just to breathe their air, all marble columns and crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than my first car. Lily looked absolutely stunning in her dress, the kind that makes you simultaneously proud and broke because you know exactly how many zeros were on that price tag. I'd written enough checks over the past 6 months to wallpaper my living room, but seeing her face light up when she spotted me in the third row made every overtime shift and canceled fishing trip worth it. I smiled through approximately 400 photos, shook hands with relatives I'd never met and would definitely never see again, and made small talk with Connor's college buddies who all looked like they'd stepped out of a J.Crew catalog. For a few hours there, I actually felt like maybe I hadn't completely botched this whole fatherhood thing. Then we got to the reception, and that's when things took a sharp left turn into the Twilight Zone. The ballroom was even fancier than the ceremony venue, if that's possible. White tablecloths so crisp they could cut bread, centerpieces that looked like they belonged in a museum, and enough champagne bottles to keep a small country buzzed for a week. At the entrance, there was this fancy check-in table with a lady who looked like she took her job way too seriously, the kind who probably alphabetizes her spice rack and color codes her underwear drawer. She was handing out these elegant name badges with gold trim and names written in gorgeous cursive that probably required a calligraphy degree to produce. Everyone ahead of me in line got theirs with a smile and a welcome to the celebration. When I stepped up, she didn't even look at me. Just slid a plain white badge across the table like she was dealing blackjack in the world's saddest casino. No gold trim, no fancy lettering, just basic Arial font that said Limited Access Guest. I picked it up and stared at it for a solid 5 seconds, convinced this had to be some kind of gag. Maybe Lily had arranged a practical joke. You know, one of those harmless wedding pranks you see on YouTube where everyone has a good laugh, and then you get your real badge. But the lady was already moving on to the next person, and nobody was laughing. "Excuse me," I said, holding up the badge like it was evidence in a murder trial. "Is this a joke or a coupon for half-price appetizers?" She barely glanced up. "That's your guest designation, sir. You can find your information packet at the welcome desk." My wife Marlene. Well, technically still my wife, though after today that status might need an asterisk, leaned over from where she'd been chatting with her sister and whispered in that urgent tone she reserves for when I'm about to embarrass her in public. "That means no plate." I blinked. "Come again." "No plate," she repeated, like saying it slower would make it make more sense. "Limited access means you don't get served dinner. There wasn't enough room at the tables, so some people are just here for the ceremony and cocktail hour. No plate." Let that sink in for a second. I'm the father of the bride, the guy who's been hemorrhaging money for the past year to make this day perfect, and I don't get a plate. I get to stand around like some kind of wedding crasher, watching everyone else enjoy the $70 per person salmon that I personally financed, while I presumably forage for dropped hors d'oeuvres under the dessert table like a raccoon at a tailgate party. I looked around the ballroom, really looked this time. Everyone was laughing, clinking glasses filled with champagne that probably cost more per bottle than my monthly electric bill. Champagne I'd written a check for back in March. Lily's college friends were already working on their second round of drinks at the open bar that I'd specifically upgraded to premium because Marlene insisted, while liquor would look tacky. Connor's family had taken over an entire section of tables near the dance floor, all sporting those fancy gold-trimmed badges that apparently indicated they were worthy of actual food. Then my eyes landed on the gift table in the corner, And there it was, my envelope. Crisp white envelope with "To Lily and Connor" written in my handwriting that never quite got the hang of looking fancy. Inside that envelope was a check for $37,500. Let me break that down for you. That's a year and a half of overtime shifts at the plant, 3 canceled vacations, a delayed roof repair that I'm definitely going to regret come next spring, and about 1,000 nights of eating ramen noodles and calling it budget meal planning. That check represented every extra hour I could scrape together, every bonus I didn't spend on myself, every small sacrifice that added up to what I thought was a generous start to their new life together. And they gave me a badge that wouldn't even get me into the buffet line. Something inside me just snapped. Not in an angry, flipping tables kind of way, more like a clarity I hadn't felt in years. You know that moment when you're doing a jigsaw puzzle and suddenly all the pieces you've been forcing together finally make sense? It was like that, except the picture that emerged was me realizing I'd been playing myself for a fool. I walked over to that gift table with the confidence of a man who's got absolutely nothing left to lose. The lady monitoring the gifts, because apparently we needed gift security at this shindig, gave me a suspicious look as I reached for my envelope, but I just smiled at her like I was retrieving my car keys. I picked up that envelope, held it up high enough for anyone paying attention to see, and in my clearest, most cheerful voice, I announced, "You know what? I think you won't be needing this anymore." The room didn't go completely silent. That only happens in movies. But there was definitely a noticeable dip in the ambient noise. Conversations stuttered. A few people stopped mid-sip. I saw Marlene's face go from confused to horrified in about 0.3 seconds, which might be a new personal record for her. Across the room, Lily was mid-selfie with her bridesmaids, and her jaw literally dropped, phone frozen in midair like someone had hit pause on a remote control. "Come back." Marlene's voice cut through the awkward silence. That particular pitch she hits when she's trying to sound calm, but is actually 2 seconds away from a meltdown. "What are you doing? Put that back." But I was already heading for the exit, envelope tucked under my arm like a football, and I was going in for the touchdown. Behind me, I could hear the click-clack of heels on marble. Lily, trying to run in those ridiculous shoes that probably cost more than my monthly car payment and looked about as practical as roller skates on an ice rink. Dad, wait." Her voice had that edge of panic that might have worked on me yesterday, but today I was a new man. I pushed through the ornate doors, probably cost $5,000 each, knowing this place, and stepped out into the late afternoon sunlight. The fresh air hit my face like a blessing, and I took the deepest breath I'd taken all day. Behind me, I could hear Lily's heels clicking faster, Marlene's voice getting shriller, and probably half the wedding party wondering what the hell just happened to their carefully choreographed celebration. I didn't turn around, didn't explain, didn't apologize. I just kept walking toward my car with that envelope in my hand and the biggest, most genuine smile I'd had in months plastered across my face. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about being a parent. You spend 25 years giving. Your time, your money, your energy, your patience, your dreams, sometimes your sanity. You give until giving becomes as natural as breathing, until you forget there was ever a version of you that existed before the endless cycle of providing and sacrificing and putting everyone else first. You tell yourself it's worth it because that's what good parents do. That's what love looks like. But somewhere along the way, giving turned into being taken from. And today I finally took something back. Not the money, really. I mean, yeah, the check was coming with me, but what I really took back was something I'd lost track of years ago: my dignity, my self-respect, my ability to recognize when I'm being treated like an afterthought at my own daughter's wedding. I got to my car, unlocked it with hands that were surprisingly steady, and tossed that envelope onto the passenger seat where it belonged. Behind me, I could hear Lily still calling, her voice getting closer, but I was already starting the engine. I caught a glimpse of her in the rearview mirror, beautiful in that expensive dress, makeup running slightly from the tears she was definitely crying, one hand reaching out like I was going to turn around and fold like I always did. But not today. Today, I was finally taking something back. And damn, it felt good. As I pulled out of the parking lot, leaving behind the marble columns and crystal chandeliers and my limited access guest badge probably trampled on the ballroom floor, I couldn't help but laugh. Not a bitter laugh, but the kind that comes from deep in your chest when you've finally figured out the punchline to a joke you've been missing for years. The punchline was me, and I was done being the joke. That night, sleep was about as attainable as a refund from the IRS. Every time I closed my eyes, that stupid badge flashed in my mind like a neon sign advertising my own irrelevance. Limited access guest. 3 words that somehow managed to summarize my entire relationship with my family in the most brutally efficient way possible. I tossed and turned until my sheets looked like I'd been wrestling an alligator, finally giving up around 4 in the morning and making coffee strong enough to strip paint off a battleship. By the time the sun came up, my phone had transformed into ground zero of a family crisis. I'm talking presidential scandal levels of communication chaos here. Text messages stacked up like pancakes at a Denny's breakfast rush, missed calls that would have made a telemarketer jealous, and voicemails that I deleted without listening to because I already knew exactly what they'd say. Some combination of, "How could you?" and "We need to talk," with a side order of, "You're being unreasonable." Marlene's text started around 7 a.m., which was early for her considering she usually doesn't achieve consciousness until at least 9 and 2 cups of that fancy organic coffee she orders from someplace in Seattle that charges more per pound than I make per hour. "Can we talk? Please don't make this a thing." "Too late, honey." It became a thing the moment someone printed that badge. "You're overreacting." It was a mistake. Right. A mistake that involved specifically downgrading my guest status in what I'm guessing was a very intentional seating chart spreadsheet. Think about Lily. This is killing her. Funny how she didn't think about me when she was handing out those badges like she was TSA at a budget airport. Lily's messages were somehow even better, hitting that perfect note of self-centered panic that only a bride in crisis can achieve. "Dad, please don't embarrass me more than you already have." Embarrass her? "Lady, I'm the one who got demoted to the kids' table, except apparently I ranked even below the kids' table because at least those little rugrats got chicken fingers. Everyone's asking what happened. What am I supposed to tell them? I don't know, Lily. Maybe try the truth?" My dad finally realized we've been treating him like a mobile ATM with legs, and he decided to cash out. "This is supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and you ruined it." "Yeah, I ruined it. Not the people who gave your father a badge that basically said, 'Thanks for the check. Now please stand in the corner and don't touch anything.'" By noon, the texts had escalated to phone calls, which I ignored with the dedication of a man who's discovered that silence is not just golden. It's titanium reinforced and bulletproof. By 2 p.m., Marlene had apparently decided that the direct approach wasn't working and switched to her nuclear option. The guilt-trip voicemail featuring her mother in the background making disappointed noises that I'm pretty sure she'd been practicing. Around 3 o'clock, she tried a different tactic. A text that simply said, "Please come over. We need to clear the air. Family shouldn't be like this. Family shouldn't be like this." Finally, something we agreed on. I stared at that message for a good 10 minutes, weighing my options. On one hand, I could continue my new life as a hermit who'd successfully escaped the family drama vortex. On the other hand, I was genuinely curious to see what kind of mental gymnastics they'd perform to explain away the badge situation. Would they go for the classic, "It was the wedding planner's fault"? Maybe try the computer glitch excuse? Or would they aim for gold and attempt the "you're remembering it wrong" approach? Curiosity won. Also, I'll admit, a small part of me wanted to watch them squirm. I showed up at Marlene's parents' house around 5, because of course she'd asked me to meet there instead of our actual home. Bringing in reinforcements like this was a hostage negotiation. The place looked the same as always. Too many decorative pillows, that weird potpourri smell that I'm convinced is just what rich people think their houses should smell like, and enough family photos on the walls to open a small gallery dedicated to people who think they're more important than they actually are. Marlene answered the door wearing her concerned wife face, the one she usually reserves for when I've done something she considers embarrassing at a social function, like exist. "Thank you for coming," she said, like I was doing her a huge favor by showing up to hear her explain why treating me like garbage was actually totally reasonable when you think about it. Her parents were already in the living room, positioned on the couch like judges on a reality TV show, except instead of critiquing someone's singing ability, they were preparing to explain why their son-in-law was being dramatic. Her dad, Gerald, who's never worked a day of overtime in his life but loves giving advice about work ethic, nodded at me like we were about to discuss a business merger. Her mom, Patricia, had that pinched expression she gets when she's trying to look sympathetic but is actually just constipated from too much kale. They sat me down in the armchair, the uncomfortable one that's clearly designed to make guests want to leave faster. And I swear to God, it felt like I was being interrogated for tax fraud. The only thing missing was a single light bulb swinging over my head and a bad cop threatening me with rubber hoses. Marlene started with what I'm guessing was her prepared opening statement. First of all, we want you to know that what happened was an oversight. A terrible, unfortunate oversight that absolutely nobody intended. An oversight. Like someone accidentally clicked downgrade father of the bride to persona non grata while trying to order more napkins. Patricia jumped in, nodding so vigorously I worried her pearl necklace might achieve liftoff. The wedding planner made so many mistakes. We've actually filed a complaint with the venue. Gerald cleared his throat importantly, the way he does when he's about to say something he thinks is profound but is actually just obvious. These things happen at big events. Miscommunication. Technical errors. You know how it is. I looked at each of them in turn, really taking in the performance. They'd clearly rehearsed this, probably multiple times, getting their story straight like witnesses preparing for trial. The unified front, the shared narrative, the careful distribution of blame to a conveniently absent wedding planner who I'd bet my remaining life savings had absolutely nothing to do with my badge situation. So let me get this straight, I said, leaning back in the world's most uncomfortable chair. A wedding planner, who you hired specifically because she's supposedly the best in the state and costs more than a used Toyota, somehow accidentally downgraded the father of the bride to limited access guest status. And none of you noticed this error during the multiple planning meetings, the seating chart reviews, the rehearsal dinner, or any other point in the 6 months leading up to the wedding. The silence that followed was the kind you could serve on a platter. Thick, awkward, and extremely uncomfortable for everyone except me. Marlene recovered first, switching to her backup strategy, the emotional appeal. Look, we know it looked bad. Looked bad? I interrupted, and I'll admit, my voice had an edge that could have cut through their bullshit like a hot knife through butter. You gave me a name tag that had less access than the photographer. I paid for that wedding, the venue, the food, the open bar, the flowers, the DJ who played way too much Bruno Mars, and I got treated like I was crashing the party. Gerald tried his hand at playing peacemaker, which was hilarious considering he'd never liked me anyway. Now, let's not get emotional about this. What's done is done. What matters is moving forward as a family. Moving forward. Right. Because acknowledging what actually happened was apparently off the table. Patricia dabbed at her eyes with a tissue she'd had ready in her pocket, because of course she'd come prepared with props. We're all so sorry you felt excluded, dear. That was never the intention. Felt excluded. Not, we're excluded. Felt. Like it was a perception problem on my end rather than an actual thing that happened in objective reality. They kept talking, throwing around words like miscommunication and unfortunate situation and family bonds. Basically every cliché from the handbook of people who've screwed up but don't want to actually admit it. Lily wasn't even there, which spoke volumes about how much she actually cared about fixing this versus just making it go away so she could get back to posting honeymoon photos. I let them talk themselves in circles for about 20 minutes, watching the show with the detached interest of someone watching a really bad improv comedy troupe try to justify why their sketch isn't landing. They wanted something from me. That much was obvious. Forgiveness, maybe. Or more likely, they wanted me to pretend everything was fine so they could stop feeling guilty and get back to their regularly scheduled programming. Finally, when they'd exhausted their prepared remarks and were starting to repeat themselves, I held up a hand. You know what? I said, and I let the pause hang there for just long enough to make them nervous. Maybe I'll change my mind. You should have seen their faces light up. It was like I'd told 3 kids on Christmas morning that Santa was real and he'd brought extra presents. Marlene's whole body relaxed, her shoulders dropping about 6 inches. Patricia actually smiled, a real smile this time instead of that pinched thing she'd been doing. Gerald nodded approvingly, probably already composing his lecture about how cooler heads prevail. They thought I was folding. They thought that one little maybe meant I was ready to sweep the whole thing under the rug, cash my check, and go back to being good old reliable dad who takes whatever scraps they toss his way with a smile and a thank you. May I have another? I wasn't folding. Not even close. I was doing something much better. I was letting them marinate in uncertainty. Let them think there was a chance I'd come around. Let them hold on to that hope like a life raft while I figured out exactly how I wanted to play this. Because here's what they didn't understand. I'd spent 25 years being predictable, being the guy who always came back, always forgave, always put family first no matter how they treated me. That guy? He got a limited access guest badge. The new guy? He was just getting started. The morning after my little visit to the family reconciliation theater, I woke up with a clarity that can only come from a full night's sleep uninterrupted by guilt. I made myself breakfast, actual breakfast with eggs and bacon, not just coffee and regret, and sat at my kitchen table thinking about something that had been nagging at the back of my mind for months. Something with 4 wheels, a busted transmission, and my name on the registration. The SUV. Oh yeah, you probably forgot about that, just like Marlene hoped I would. See, about 8 months ago, Marlene's car decided to die in spectacular fashion. Transmission gave out in the middle of a grocery store parking lot, which she described to me over the phone like it was the fall of Rome. Smoke everywhere, terrible, grinding noises, the whole dramatic production. She needed a car immediately because apparently walking or using public transportation like normal people wasn't an option for someone of her refined sensibilities. So being the helpful, soon-to-be ex-husband that I was, I loaned her my SUV. My beautiful, paid-off, reliable SUV that I'd been driving for 6 years without a single major issue. It was supposed to be temporary, just until she got her car fixed or bought a new one. 2 weeks tops, she'd promised, looking at me with those eyes that used to work on me back when I still believed things like promises and wedding vows meant something. 2 weeks turned into a month. A month turned into 3. Every time I asked about it, she had a new excuse ready to go like she was working off a script. The mechanic is still looking at it. I'm waiting for the insurance check to clear. I'm researching new cars, but the market is crazy right now. My back's been hurting, and I need the higher seat position. That last one was particularly creative, I'll give her that. But here's the thing she forgot in her whirlwind of excuses and convenient memory lapses. The registration was still under my name. The insurance? My policy. The monthly parking spot at her apartment building that cost more than some people's rent? Technically, I was paying for that too through the auto pay she'd set up on my credit card, and I'd never bothered to cancel because I'm apparently a very slow learner. I finished my eggs, rinsed my plate, because I'm not an animal, despite what the limited access guest badge might suggest, and made a phone call to Randy's towing service. Randy and I go way back. We worked together at the plant before he decided to start his own business, which turned out to be a smart move considering he now drives a truck nicer than most people's houses. Randy, I said when he picked up, remember that favor you owe me from when I helped you move last summer? Oh man, don't tell me you're calling it in already, he laughed. That couch almost killed me. What do you need? I need you to tow a vehicle for me. Today, if possible. And I need it done with maximum efficiency and minimum warning. There was a pause, and I could practically hear his grin through the phone. This sounds like a story I want to hear over beers. I'll tell you the whole thing, but right now I need you to pick up an SUV from 447 Maple Ridge Apartments, Building C, Spot 23. Silver Honda Pilot. Registration's in my name, so it's completely legal. Got it. What time? I checked my watch. Marlene usually left for her yoga class, or whatever she called sitting in expensive athletic or drinking smoothies with her friends, around 9:30. Let's say 9:15. Right in that sweet spot where she's probably drinking her overpriced coffee but hasn't left yet. You're evil, man. I like it. I'll send Jimmy with the flatbed. We hung up, and I sat back with my coffee, feeling that warm glow of anticipation that comes with knowing you're about to make someone's day significantly more complicated. Was it petty? Absolutely. Was it justified? Asked the guy with the limited access guest badge. I went about my morning, read the paper, did some laundry, organized my garage because apparently I had time for hobbies now that I wasn't funding other people's life choices, and waited. At exactly 9:17, my phone rang. Marlene's name flashed on the screen, and I let it ring 3 times before answering, because timing is everything in comedy and revenge. Hello. They're towing the car. Her voice hit that particular frequency that probably scared dogs 3 blocks away. There's a tow truck outside, and they're hooking up the SUV. Did you do this? I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the moment like a fine wine. Sure did. Why? Why would you do this? Well, Marlene, it's pretty simple actually. See, I'm changing insurance companies, and when I called to get quotes, they asked me to list all vehicles registered under my name. Funny thing, your car, the one that's been at the mechanic for 8 months, is still registered to me. So I figured, if I'm paying the insurance and the registration and apparently the parking fees that keep auto-charging to my credit card, I might as well have the actual vehicle. But I need that car. I have appointments today. Should have thought about that before you decided I was a limited access guest at my own daughter's wedding. Speaking of which, how was the rest of the reception? Did everyone enjoy the salmon I paid for? This is insane. You can't just take my car. Actually, it's my car. That's kind of the point. And I can absolutely take my own property that I've been graciously loaning to someone who apparently thinks I'm not worth a dinner plate. Funny how ownership works, isn't it? I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end, probably cycling through emotions faster than a slot machine. Anger, disbelief, more anger, maybe a touch of realization that she'd severely miscalculated how far she could push me. This is about the wedding, she said finally, her voice dropping to that tone she uses when she's trying to sound reasonable, but is actually seething. You're punishing me for something that wasn't even my fault. Punishing you? Marlene, I'm just reclaiming my assets. Think of it as me changing my whole portfolio. Insurance companies, family structures, my tolerance for being treated like a second-class citizen. I'm doing a complete overhaul. Very financially responsible of me, actually. Your dad would probably approve, you know? If he wasn't too busy making excuses for why nobody noticed the father of the bride got downgraded to standing room only status. You're being completely unfair. And there it was, the card they always played when they ran out of actual arguments. I was being unfair. Not them for the badge situation, not them for 8 months of borrowing my car with no intention of returning it, not them for treating me like a mobile bank with an unlimited withdrawal policy. No, I was the unfair one for finally enforcing some boundaries. You know what's unfair? I said, and I kept my voice level, almost cheerful. Spending 25 years being everyone's backup plan, their emergency fund, their reliable old dad who'll always be there no matter how they treat him. That's unfair. What I'm doing right now, this is just balancing the books. I can't believe you're acting like this over a simple mistake. Simple mistake, I repeated, letting the words hang there like laundry on a line. Right? Hey, speaking of mistakes, you should probably check your parking spot. I think Jimmy's about to load up the SUV. You might want to grab anything important from inside before it goes. She made a sound that was part shriek, part growl, and I heard the phone clatter. Probably dropped it in her rush to get outside and watch her transportation disappear onto a flatbed. I didn't hang up, just listened to the muffled chaos on her end. Car doors slamming, her yelling at Jimmy who I knew wouldn't respond because Randy trains his guys well, the mechanical whir of the tow truck's lift doing its job with beautiful efficiency. After about 30 seconds, she picked the phone back up. "How could you do this?" she said. And now her voice had that tremor that might have worked on me yesterday, last week, last month, any time in the past 2.5 decades. "Easy," I said. "I just called Randy and asked him to pick up my vehicle." The whole process took about 5 minutes, which is coincidentally about the same amount of time it probably took someone to change my guest status from father of the bride to guy who doesn't even get a folding chair. Funny how quick things can change when you actually decide to do something about them. What am I supposed to drive? I don't know, Marlene. Maybe check with the wedding planner. I hear she's responsible for all kinds of unexpected problems. You're going to regret this. You know what I regret? That commemorative plate I bought Lily for her 16th birthday. Thing cost me $80 and she never even took it out of the box. But this I'm feeling pretty good about. She sputtered something else, but I was done. Hey, I gotta go. But don't worry about the SUV. I'll take excellent care of it. Oh, and Marlene, you still have limited access to my patience, my money, and apparently now my vehicle collection. Have a great day. I hung up before she could respond, and I'm not gonna lie, I laughed. Not a little chuckle, but a full body, tears in my eyes. Probably looks crazy to anyone watching laugh that came from somewhere deep in my chest, where I'd been storing all the frustration and disappointment and sheer disbelief at how my own family had treated me. My phone immediately started ringing again. I declined the call. It rang again. Declined. On the third ring, I just turned it off completely and poured myself another cup of coffee. Revenge, I realized as I sat there in my peaceful kitchen with my phone off and my SUV on its way back to my driveway where it belonged, doesn't have to feel hot and angry. Sometimes it feels efficient, calculated, and deeply, deeply satisfying. I'd spent years giving my time, my money, my vehicles, apparently my dignity. Today I took something back. Not just the SUV, but something more important. The understanding that I didn't have to accept being treated like an afterthought just because we shared DNA or wedding vows or a last name. The coffee was good. The silence was better. And somewhere across town, Marlene was probably calling an Uber and realizing that limited access was a two-way street. And honestly, I was just getting warmed up. 3 days of blessed silence passed after the great SUV reclamation of 2025. 3 days where my phone stayed blissfully quiet. My blood pressure probably dropped 20 points, and I rediscovered what it felt like to wake up without immediately wondering which family member would need something from me today. I went fishing, caught exactly nothing, and had the best time I'd had in months. Turns out, sitting in a boat doing absolutely nothing productive is therapeutic when you've spent 2 decades being everyone's personal ATM and emotional support animal. Then, on day 4, my phone rang. Marlene again, but this time the caller ID showed her parents' landline, which meant she'd recruited backup. When someone breaks out the landline in 2025, you know they mean business, or they're old and don't trust cell phones, which in Gerald and Patricia's case was both. "We'd like you to come over again," Marlene said when I answered, her voice doing that carefully controlled thing where she's clearly furious but trying to sound reasonable. To talk. Really talk this time. Does really talk mean something different from regular talking? Because last time we talked, I got a lot of excuses and exactly zero accountability. "Please," she said, and there was something in her voice that wasn't quite begging but was definitely in the neighborhood. "We want to work this out. Family is important. Family is important." Funny how family becomes important right around the time someone needs something. But curiosity got the better of me again. Curiosity, and, if I'm being honest, a growing sense that watching these people try to manipulate me was becoming my new favorite form of entertainment. So I agreed to show up that afternoon, mentally preparing myself for round 2 of the Family Excuse Olympics. The house smelled different this time when I walked in. Less potpourri, more desperation with undertones of overbrewed coffee. They'd set up in the dining room instead of the living room, which felt more formal, like they were trying to create an atmosphere of serious negotiation. Gerald sat at the head of the table because of course he did, Patricia to his right doing her concerned grandmother face, and Marlene across from me looking like she'd aged 5 years in 3 days. Lily was conspicuously absent again, which told me everything I needed to know about how much she actually cared about fixing our relationship versus just making the awkwardness go away. "Thank you for coming," Gerald started, folding his hands on the table like we were about to discuss quarterly earnings. "We've all had some time to reflect on the situation." "The situation," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it? I would have gone with the time you treated me like expired lunch meat, but sure, situation works too." Patricia flinched. Marlene looked down at her hands. Gerald pressed on like a lawyer who's rehearsed his opening statement in the mirror. "We understand you felt disrespected at the wedding," he said, and I noticed the word "felt" again, like my experience of reality was optional. "And we recognize that the badge incident was poorly handled." "Poorly handled," I said. "That's one way to put it. Another way would be deliberately orchestrated to exclude me from the reception I paid for. But hey, I'm not a wordsmith." Marlene jumped in, clearly following some script they'd prepared. "We know you're upset about the car too, and we get it. But Dad, we're family. We make mistakes. That's what families do. They mess up, and then they forgive each other and move forward." "Interesting theory," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Quick question though, when exactly does the forgiveness part kick in? Because I've been waiting for an actual apology for about a week now, and all I keep getting is passive voice explanations about how mistakes were made, like they just happened spontaneously without any human involvement." Silence. The uncomfortable kind that makes people shift in their seats and suddenly find the wallpaper fascinating. Gerald cleared his throat. "What would it take for you to reconsider your position on everything?" And there it was, the real reason for this meeting. Not to apologize, not to actually address what they'd done, but to negotiate. to figure out the minimum amount of groveling required to get me back on board the family gravy train. I could see it in their faces. They needed something. Probably the honeymoon money they were expecting. Maybe Lily had already made plans based on that check I'd taken back, booked some overpriced resort in Bali or the Maldives or wherever Instagram influencers pretend to relax these days. And now they were in a bind because apparently burning through their own money wasn't as fun as burning through mine. You want to know what it would take? I said, and I let the question sit there for a moment while I gathered my thoughts. How about we start with basic respect? How about treating me like a human being instead of a mobile financing option? How about acknowledging that what happened at that wedding wasn't a mistake or an oversight, but a deliberate choice that somebody made? It wasn't deliberate, Marlene protested, but her voice lacked conviction. She knew. They all knew. The question was whether they'd actually admit it. Really? Because I've been thinking about this a lot over the past few days, and you know what I realized? That badge didn't just appear out of thin air. Someone had to go into whatever system they use for weddings, probably some fancy app that costs money just to download, and specifically change my guest status. Someone had to make a conscious decision that the father of the bride, the guy funding the whole operation, didn't need a seat or a meal. That's not an accident, Marlene. That's a choice. Patricia made a small sound, something between a gasp and a whimper. Gerald's jaw tightened. Marlene looked like she wanted to crawl under the table and disappear, which honestly would have been the most interesting thing to happen at this meeting. But I wasn't done. So here's what I'm thinking, I continued, and I could see them all lean forward slightly, desperate for whatever olive branch I might extend. You want the honeymoon money? Fine. We can talk about that. But it's not a gift anymore. What do you mean? Marlene asked carefully, like she was afraid of the answer but needed to hear it anyway. I mean, it's a loan. A proper loan with proper terms. 10 months of repayment. 5% interest, which honestly is generous considering current market rates. I'll draw up the paperwork, you'll sign it, and we'll do this like adults conducting a business transaction. Because clearly that's what our relationship has become anyway, transactional. Might as well make it official. You could have heard a pin drop in that dining room. Hell, you could have heard a feather land on carpet. They stared at me like I'd just suggested we all run naked through the mall singing show tunes. But it was a gift, Marlene finally said, her voice small. You were giving it to them as a gift. That's what you said. Yeah, well, that was before I got my limited access guest badge. Funny how having your daughter and your wife treat you like you're not worth a chicken dinner changes your perspective on generosity. Gifts are for people who value you. Loans are for people who need to be reminded that money doesn't grow on trees, and neither does my patience. Gerald found his voice, trying to regain control of the situation. Now that seems a bit harsh, don't you think? They're newlyweds. Starting out. That money would really help them. Oh, it'll still help them, I interrupted. They'll just have to pay it back like responsible adults. You know, the kind of adults who are supposedly mature enough to get married, but apparently not mature enough to treat their parents with basic decency. What about family? Patricia said, playing her trump card with that wounded voice she does so well. Family doesn't charge each other interest. Family helps each other. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something shift inside me. Something that had been bending for years finally snapped, but not in an angry way. More like a bone that had been broken so long it finally decided to set itself properly. You're absolutely right, Patricia, I said, and my voice was calm, almost pleasant. Family doesn't charge interest. Family also doesn't hand out badges that basically say you're not important enough to eat with us. Family doesn't borrow cars for 8 months and act surprised when you want them back. Family doesn't spend months planning a wedding and conveniently forget to include the guy who's paying for it in the actual celebration. So yeah, you're right about what family should do. Question is, where was that energy at the wedding? More silence. The kind that feels heavy, like the air right before a thunderstorm. Marlene tried one more time, her voice cracking slightly. So that's it. You're just going to treat your daughter like a debtor? Make her pay back money you were going to give her anyway. No, I said, standing up from the table. I'm going to treat her like an adult who made choices and now gets to deal with the consequences. You want the money? It's available. As a loan. 10 months. 5% interest. I'll even waive the first month's payment as a wedding gift, because I'm not a complete monster despite what you all seem to think. I pulled out my phone, opened the Notes app, and started typing. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to send you a proper loan agreement. You're going to show it to Lily and Connor. They're going to decide if they want to sign it. If they do, great. The money's theirs, and we can all move forward with clearly defined boundaries. If they don't, also great. I'll take that $37,000 and finally get the roof fixed, and maybe take a vacation somewhere where nobody knows my name or expects me to fund their life choices. I headed for the door, but paused with my hand on the knob, one more thing occurring to me. Oh, and one more thing. Delete me from the family group chat. I'm done reading messages about family goals and blessed to have each other from people who couldn't even guarantee me a chair at my own daughter's wedding. If you need to reach me, you have my number. Use it like adults, with actual phone calls where you have to hear the disappointment in my voice. I walked out before they could respond, leaving behind 3 stunned faces and probably the most honest conversation that family had had in years. My hands were steady as I got in my SUV that was back where it belonged, in my possession, and drove away from that house full of expensive furniture and cheap excuses. The loan thing wasn't really about the money, though 5% interest on 37 grand would be nice. It was about something bigger: respect, accountability, the radical idea that treating people like garbage might actually have consequences. I drove home in silence, no radio, just the sound of my engine and my thoughts. And somewhere in that silence, I realized something profound. For the first time in 25 years, I wasn't worried about whether they were mad at me. I was too busy respecting myself to care. That night, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I actually relaxed. Made myself a decent dinner, cracked open a beer that had been sitting in my fridge since before the wedding, and settled into my couch to watch a game I didn't care about between 2 teams I'd never heard of. It was perfect. No texts demanding my attention, no calls requiring me to solve someone else's problems, no guilt trips about how I was destroying the family by having the audacity to expect basic human decency. Just me, my couch, and the gentle hum of my refrigerator keeping me company. Around 9:30, my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it. My new default setting, but something made me check. Probably the same morbid curiosity that makes people slow down to look at car accidents. The name on the screen surprised me. Connor Mitchell. Lily's husband. The groom. The guy who'd probably been getting an earful from my daughter about what a terrible, unreasonable, petty person her father was for the past week. I stared at the notification for a solid 10 seconds, debating whether to open it or just delete it and go back to my beer and my game between the who cares and the doesn't matter. Curiosity won again. I'm starting to think curiosity might be my fatal flaw, like Achilles in his heel, except mine is just wanting to know what fresh nonsense people are going to throw at me next. I opened the message. Mr. Reed, I hope it's okay that I'm texting you. I got your number from the wedding contact list. I wanted to reach out personally because I've been hearing a lot about what happened, and honestly, I think you deserve an apology. A real one. What happened at the wedding wasn't right, and I'm really sorry. I didn't know about the badge situation until after you left, and when I found out, I was pretty horrified. That's not how you treat family, and definitely not how you treat someone who's been as generous as you've been. Anyway, I know things are complicated right now, but I wanted you to know that not everyone thinks you're being unreasonable. Connor. I read it twice, then a third time, because I honestly couldn't believe what I was seeing. An actual apology. No excuses, no mistakes were made, passive voice garbage. No attempts to blame wedding planners or computer glitches or acts of God. Just a straightforward acknowledgement that what happened was wrong and he was sorry. From my son-in-law. The one person in this entire mess who wasn't even blood-related to me and therefore had the least obligation to care. I sat there with my phone in my hand, beer forgotten, game completely ignored, just processing the fact that the youngest person in this family drama was apparently the only one with enough emotional intelligence to understand how apologies work. I typed back, "Thanks, Connor. Appreciate you reaching out. Tell Lily I'll send her a wedding gift after all. Directions to a good therapist. She's clearly going to need one if she inherited her mother's conflict resolution skills." I hit send before I could second-guess the snark, then immediately wondered if I'd gone too far. But then 3 dots appeared, showing he was typing, and his response came through. Haha, okay, that made me laugh. Lily's actually been pretty torn up about all this, if I'm being honest. I think she knows she messed up, but doesn't know how to fix it. Her mom keeps telling her you're just being dramatic and you'll come around eventually, but I don't know, man. If someone gave me a limited access badge at my own wedding, I'd probably burn the place down. You just took your check back, which seems pretty restrained actually. I actually smiled at that. A real smile, not the bitter ones I'd been sporting lately. You're a good kid, Connor. I typed back. Lily's lucky to have you. Even if she's currently unlucky enough to have me as a dad who's apparently reached his lifetime quota of accepting disrespect. You're not a bad dad, Mr. Reed. I think you're just done being taken advantage of. There's a difference. And there it was, someone who got it. Someone who understood that setting boundaries wasn't the same as being vindictive, that expecting basic respect wasn't the same as being unreasonable, that walking away from people who treat you like garbage wasn't abandonment, it was self-preservation. From a 26-year-old kid who'd known me for all of 2 years. We texted back and forth for another 20 minutes. Nothing deep or philosophical. Just casual conversation like two normal people who didn't have a family crisis sitting between them like a third person in the room. He told me about the honeymoon they were trying to plan. Turned out they'd been looking at Hawaii instead of Bali, which I appreciated because at least Hawaii was still in the same time zone, and how they were dealing with the reality that the money they'd been counting on was now contingent on signing loan paperwork. Lily's pretty upset about the loan thing, he admitted. But honestly, I get it. My dad always told me there's no such thing as free money, just money you haven't paid for yet. If we take it, we should pay it back. That's just how life works. Your dad sounds like a smart guy. He is. He also would have kicked my ass if I'd treated him the way. Well, you know, sorry, don't want to throw Lily under the bus. You're not throwing her under the bus, Connor. You're just acknowledging reality. The bus already ran over me. You're just confirming it happened. Another laughing emoji popped up on my screen. Are you and Lily going to take the loan? I asked, figuring I might as well get a straight answer from someone who seemed capable of giving one. I wanna, he typed back. The terms are more than fair. My bank would charge way more than 5%. And honestly, having something in writing feels better than just taking money and hoping nobody gets mad about it later. But Lily's still processing everything. Her mom keeps telling her it's insulting. That family doesn't operate like a business. All that stuff. Family doesn't operate like a business, I said out loud to my empty living room. But apparently family does operate like a hierarchy, where some people get gold badges and salmon dinners, while other people get paper name tags and the privilege of standing in the corner. I didn't type that part though. Connor was being decent, and I didn't want to put him in a worse position than he was already in, caught between his new wife and her increasingly unreasonable family expectations. Take your time deciding, I typed instead. The money's not going anywhere. Well, except maybe toward my roof repair if nobody signs by the end of the month. That thing's been leaking since March, and I keep putting it off because I was, you know, funding other people's dreams instead of fixing my own house. Metaphorically and literally. That's actually kind of deep, Mr. Reed. Call me Jim. Mr. Reed makes me sound like I'm about to give you a pop quiz. Okay, Jim. And hey, for what it's worth, I think you're handling this whole thing better than most people would. My cousin had a similar situation at his wedding. His parents got into this huge fight about seating arrangements, and it turned into this years-long drama that basically split the family in half. You're just being clear about your boundaries. That's healthy. Healthy. There was that word again. Turned out that standing up for yourself wasn't toxic or dramatic or unreasonable. It was healthy. Who knew? We wrapped up the conversation with him promising to talk to Lily about the loan agreement, and me promising not to hold the whole limited access guest thing against him personally, since he'd apparently had nothing to do with it. After we said goodnight, I sat there with my phone in my hand, that small conversation doing something I didn't expect. It reminded me that decency still existed in the world. Connor didn't have to reach out. He didn't owe me anything. Technically, I owed his wedding a very expensive gift that I dramatically reclaimed in front of God and everyone. But he texted me anyway, apologized for something that wasn't his fault, and treated me like a human being worthy of basic respect. That small act of human kindness did more for me than all of Marlene's excuses, Gerald and Patricia's carefully worded non-apologies, and Lily's radio silence combined. It reminded me that my expectations weren't too high. I wasn't asking for the moon or demanding everyone worship at the altar of my feelings. I was just asking to be treated with the bare minimum of consideration. And apparently, that wasn't too much to ask. It just was too much to ask from people who'd gotten so used to taking from me that they'd forgotten I was a person with feelings and limits and the ability to say no more. I finished my beer, lukewarm by now, but still good, and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: hope. Not the naive kind that makes you think everything's going to magically get better, but the realistic kind that reminds you there are still good people in the world. People with backbones and consciences and the basic human decency to acknowledge when something's wrong. Connor was a good kid. Better than my daughter deserved right now, honestly, though I'd never say that out loud. But he gave me something that night, something more valuable than any check or loan repayment or forced family reconciliation. He gave me validation. Proof that I wasn't crazy, wasn't being unreasonable, wasn't the villain in this story despite how Marlene was probably painting me in every conversation with everyone who'd listen. I was just a guy who'd reached his limit and decided to enforce it. And according to at least one person in this mess, that was perfectly okay. I slept better that night than I had in months. Not because anything had been resolved or fixed or apologized for properly, but because one person, just one, had taken the time to say what happened to you was wrong, and you didn't deserve it. Sometimes, that's all you need to keep going. Not everyone on your side, just someone who sees clearly enough to call it like it is. And maybe, just maybe, that someone being your son-in-law instead of your daughter said more about the current state of my family than any badge ever could. But hey, at least someone in the next generation had a functioning moral compass. That was something. That was actually a hell of a lot more than something. That night, I poured myself one more beer, raised it toward my phone where Connor's messages still glowed on the screen, and said out loud to my empty house, "Here's to you, kid. You're going to do just fine. Even if your wife's family is a complete disaster." Then I drank to that, turned off my phone, and let the silence settle around me like a warm blanket. It was the best night I'd had in years. A week crawled by after my surprisingly decent conversation with Connor, and I settled into what I was starting to think of as my new normal. Mornings were quiet, afternoons were peaceful, and evenings were blissfully free of family drama and guilt trips masquerading as concerned phone calls. I fixed that leak in my roof. Turned out it only cost about $800 and 3 hours of a contractor's time, which was significantly less painful than funding a wedding for people who thought I ranked somewhere between wedding crasher and guy who delivers the ice. I was in my garage on a Tuesday afternoon, organizing tools I hadn't touched in months because I'd been too busy working overtime to afford other people's life milestones, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My first instinct was to ignore it, probably spam, maybe a scam, definitely not worth interrupting my newfound zen of arranging socket wrenches by size. But something made me check it anyway. Maybe the universe was rewarding my curiosity, or maybe I'm just incapable of leaving mysteries alone. Either way, I opened the message. "Hi, Mr. Reed. This is Ashley Chun. I'm Connor's cousin. We met briefly at the wedding. I was wearing the blue dress and helped with the guest book. I hope you don't mind Connor giving me your number, but I have some information I think you should know. Can I call you?" I stared at the message, trying to place her. Blue dress at the wedding, guest book? Yeah, vaguely. I remembered a young woman with glasses who'd smiled at me genuinely when I walked in. One of maybe 3 people that day who'd treated me like an actual human being instead of a wallet with legs. Sure, I typed back, figuring this couldn't be worse than anything else I'd dealt with lately. My phone rang about 10 seconds later. "Mr. Reed? Thank you so much for taking my call." Her voice was nervous, the kind of nervous you get when you're about to tell someone something that's going to piss them off, but you know they need to hear it. "I've been debating whether to reach out for days, but Connor said you deserve to know the truth, and honestly, I agree with him." "The truth about what?" I asked, setting down the wrench I'd been holding and giving her my full attention. "About the seating arrangements. The badge situation." She took a breath, and I could hear her gathering courage on the other end of the line. "Mr. Reed, I helped coordinate the seating chart and the guest badges. I was basically the assistant wedding planner's assistant because my mom volunteered me, and I got stuck with all the detail work nobody else wanted to do." "Okay," I said slowly, not sure where this was going but feeling that familiar tingle of incoming information that was going to make me either very angry or very vindicated. Maybe both. "You were originally listed as VIP family. Top tier. Reserved seating at the head table, full meal service, the whole premium package." I I saw it myself when I first started working on the spreadsheet 3 months before the wedding. My hand tightened on my phone. Originally, right? Originally. But then, 3 days before the wedding, I got an email with changes to the seating chart. Your status had been changed from VIP family to limited access guest. I thought it was a mistake. Like, obviously it had to be a mistake because who downgrades the father of the bride? So I called the number listed as the primary contact to confirm. And who was the primary contact? I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew the answer. Your wife, Marlene. Ashley's voice got quieter, like she was afraid the words themselves might jump through the phone and attack me. She confirmed the change was correct, said it was intentional. When I asked if she was sure, because it seemed really unusual, she told me, and I'm quoting here, "It's complicated family dynamics and not your concern. Just make the change." The garage felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. I sat down on my workbench, processing what I was hearing. She changed it herself, I said. Not a question, just a statement that needed to exist in the air. Yes, sir. And I'm really sorry, but there's more. Ashley sounded genuinely pained to be telling me this. After I updated your status, I sent a confirmation email to all the primary decision makers, which included your wife and your daughter. Standard procedure. We always sent confirmations for major changes so nobody could claim they didn't know. Your daughter replied within an hour. She wrote approved. Thanks for handling this. My coffee from earlier threatened to make a reappearance. I'd suspected it wasn't just Marlene. You don't pull off something that coordinated without multiple people being in on it, but having it confirmed was different. Suspecting your daughter helped demote you at her own wedding is one thing. Knowing it for sure is something else entirely. Do you still have those emails? I heard myself ask, my voice surprisingly steady. Considering I felt like I'd just been hit by a truck driven by my own family. I do. I save everything for liability purposes. You wouldn't believe how many people try to blame coordinators when things go wrong at weddings. I can forward them to you if you want proof, though I understand if you'd rather just take my word for it. I know this is a lot. Forward them, I said. Please. I'm not saying I don't believe you, but I'd like to see it in writing. Call me old-fashioned, but I prefer my betrayals documented. She laughed nervously. I'll send them right now. And Mr. Reed? I'm really sorry. What they did was messed up. My mom and I talked about it after the wedding when we heard you'd left. She said if someone had done that to my dad at my wedding, he'd probably have done a lot worse than just take back a check. Your mom sounds reasonable. She is. She also said, and again I'm quoting, some people get so caught up in making a wedding look perfect on Instagram that they forget it's supposed to be about love and family. I think she was talking about your daughter, but she was too polite to say it directly. We talked for a few more minutes. She gave me details about the timeline, explained how the whole badge system worked, confirmed that yes, my downgrade was absolutely intentional and not some clerical error or computer glitch. By the time we hung up, I had a clearer picture of exactly what happened. And let me tell you, clarity is a double-edged sword. On one hand, I now knew for certain I wasn't crazy or oversensitive or dramatic. On the other hand, I now knew for certain that my daughter had actively participated in humiliating me at her own wedding. True to her word, Ashley's email arrived about 2 minutes after we hung up. 3 forwarded messages, time-stamped, and everything, laying out the whole sordid timeline like evidence in a court case. There was the original seating chart with my name at the head table, marked VIP. There was Marlene's email requesting the change to limited access, with wording so cold and businesslike it could have come from a corporate restructuring memo. And there was Lily's response, approved. Thanks for handling this. Just don't make a big deal about it with anyone else on the team. Don't make a big deal about it. I read that line probably 15 times, each time hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something less damning. They didn't. My daughter had approved my demotion and then asked the coordinator to keep it quiet, like she knew exactly how bad it would look if anyone found out. I sat there in my garage, surrounded by organized tools and forwarded emails, and something finally clicked into place. All that talk before the wedding about being so busy and stressed with final details whenever I tried to ask about seating arrangements or my role in the ceremony. It wasn't stress. It was avoidance. They knew what they'd done, knew I'd probably have questions or concerns, and just decided not to deal with it until it was too late for me to do anything about it. Except they miscalculated. They thought I'd be so invested in not making a scene, so committed to being the good dad who doesn't rock the boat, that I'd just swallow my humiliation and pretend everything was fine. Smile for the photos, shake hands with strangers, and quietly accept my demotion from father to inconvenient guest. They were wrong. I forwarded the email chain to myself on 3 different accounts because I've watched enough true crime shows to know you always back up your evidence. Then I just sat there, phone in hand, staring at the proof that my own family had conspired to exclude me from a celebration I'd funded. My phone rang. Marlene. I declined the call. It rang again immediately. She must have seen the read receipt on some previous message I'd ignored. Declined again. Then a text. We need to talk. Now. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop, created a new folder labeled Wedding Receipts, with a level of pettiness that would have made my younger self proud, and saved all the emails Ashley had sent. Every invoice I'd paid for the wedding went in there too. The venue deposit, the catering, the photographer, the florist, that ridiculous ice sculpture Lily insisted we needed even though it melted before dinner service. $37,500, itemized and documented. Then I drafted an email. Not to send right now. I'm not that impulsive, despite recent evidence to the contrary, but just to have ready. Something simple and devastating. To whom it may concern. Attached, please find documentation regarding the seating arrangements for the Mitchell-Reed wedding on date. As you'll see, the change to my guest status was neither an error nor an oversight, but a deliberate choice made by the bride and her mother 3 days prior to the event. I'm sharing this not out of spite, but because I believe in transparency. If you're going to intentionally exclude someone from a celebration they funded, at least own it. Regards, Jim Reed. I didn't put any recipients in the to field yet. That email was just for me. Sitting in my drafts folder like a loaded gun I wasn't sure I'd ever need to fire, but felt better knowing I had it. My phone rang again. Marlene again. This time, I answered. Did you put Ashley up to this? She demanded. No hello, no pretense of civility. Did you pay her to send you those emails? I actually laughed. Not a bitter laugh, more like genuine amusement at the absolute audacity. Put her up to it? Marlene, I didn't even know who she was until an hour ago. She reached out because apparently she has something you and Lily don't. A conscience. Those emails are private. Those emails are evidence, I interrupted. Evidence that you deliberately changed my status 3 days before the wedding and Lily approved it. Evidence that the whole "it was a mistake" story you've been selling for the past 2 weeks is complete garbage. Evidence that my own family conspired to humiliate me and then lied about it. Silence. The kind that feels like falling. It wasn't meant to humiliate you, she finally said, her voice smaller now. It was just, there wasn't enough room and we had to make cuts somewhere. Cuts. Marlene, you cut the father of the bride. Not some distant cousin or your coworkers plus one. Me. And then you both lied about it being an accident. What do you want? She asked, and there was an edge of desperation in her voice. What do you want from us? An apology? Done. I'm sorry. We're sorry. Can we please just move past this? What I want, I said slowly, is for you to stop insulting my intelligence. You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. I hung up before she could respond, turned off my phone completely, and sat in the quiet of my garage with the proof of my family's betrayal saved in multiple formats and backed up to the cloud. The truth shall set you free, right? Well, I was free now, free from any remaining doubt about whether I was overreacting, free from guilt about taking back my check, free from the obligation to pretend everything was fine when it was decidedly not fine. But freedom, I was learning, feels a lot like loneliness at first. Give it time, though, and it starts to feel like peace. I'd take peace over family dysfunction any day of the week. The days following Ashley's email bomb were weird in a way I couldn't quite put into words. It's like when you finally get an answer to a question that's been eating at you for weeks, and instead of feeling better, you just feel hollow. Vindicated, sure, but also exhausted. Turns out being right about your family conspiring against you isn't the victory it sounds like on paper. It's more like winning a contest you never wanted to enter in the first place. Marlene tried the full-court press for about 48 hours after that phone call. Texts at all hours, voicemails that started apologetic and ended accusatory. Even an email with the subject line, "Can we please be adults about this?" which was rich coming from someone who'd orchestrated a secret demotion like we were in some corporate espionage thriller instead of planning a wedding. Her latest attempt came on a Thursday evening while I was making dinner. Actual cooking, not just microwaving leftovers or ordering pizza, because apparently having extra time and mental energy allows you to remember you own a stove. I was pan-searing some chicken, feeling pretty domestic, when my phone started buzzing on the counter. Marlene's face popped up on the screen, that photo from 5 years ago when we actually liked each other, or at least did a better job pretending. I let it ring out. The voicemail notification appeared about 10 seconds later. Against my better judgment, curiosity, my old nemesis, I played it on speaker while I flipped my chicken. Jim, please, can we just talk like adults? Family makes mistakes. That's what families do. We mess up. We apologize. We move forward. That's how this works. You can't just shut us all out forever because of one bad day. Think about Lily. Think about what you're doing to your relationship with your daughter. Is your pride really worth losing your family over? I stared at my phone like it had just grown a second screen. The audacity was actually impressive in its scope, turning my completely justified reaction to their deliberate exclusion into some character flaw on my part. I was the problem for having standards, for expecting basic respect, for refusing to play along with their revisionist history where everything was just an unfortunate misunderstanding. No apology, just excuses, I said to my empty kitchen, because talking to yourself is either a sign of insanity or a sign you've spent too much time around people who don't listen. In my case, probably both. I deleted the voicemail without responding, flipped my chicken one more time, and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no twinge of guilt that maybe I was being too harsh. Just nothing. Turns out there's a limit to how many times you can hear, but family, before the word loses all meaning and just becomes a sound people make when they want something from you. After dinner, which was excellent. By the way, I'm basically a chef now. I opened my laptop and pulled up that loan agreement I'd mentioned at the family meeting. I'd been putting it off, partly because I was busy and partly because I wasn't sure if I was serious about it. But sitting there with a glass of whiskey that probably cost more than my original wedding gift would have per ounce, I realized I was absolutely serious. I spent the next hour crafting the most professional, airtight loan agreement this side of a bank's legal department. Principal amount, $37,500. Interest rate, 5% annually. Repayment term, 10 months, with the first payment due 30 days after signing. I even included a clause about early repayment without penalty, because I'm not a monster, and another clause about what happens if they default. Spoiler alert. Nothing dramatic, just standard small claims court procedure. I read through it twice, made sure every I was dotted and every T was crossed, and saved it with the file name Reed Mitchell and final the PDF, because even my document naming was professional now. Then I attached it to an email address to both Lily and Connor, with Marlene CC'd for good measure. The email itself was brief. Lily and Connor. As discussed, attached is the loan agreement for the $37,500. Terms are outlined clearly in the document. If you choose to accept these terms, please print, sign, scan, and return by the end of the month. If not, no hard feelings. I'll redirect the funds towards some home improvements and a vacation I've been putting off for about a decade. Connor, thanks again for reaching out last week. It meant a lot. Jim. I hovered over the send button for approximately 3 seconds before clicking it. The whoosh sound of the email departing felt weirdly final, like I was launching something into space that I couldn't call back even if I wanted to. My phone rang almost immediately. Marlene. Of course. A loan agreement? She practically shrieked when I answered. You actually sent them a formal loan agreement like they're strangers? They treated me like a stranger at the wedding, I said calmly, swirling my whiskey. Seems only fair to return the favor. Besides, this way everyone knows exactly where they stand. No confusion, no hurt feelings, no room for interpretation. It's actually the healthiest thing I could do for all of us. Healthy? Jim, this is insane. You're turning family into a business transaction. Marlene, I said, and my voice had that quality I perfected over the past few weeks. Not angry, not emotional, just completely done with the conversation before it even started. Family stopped being family when you changed my guest status and lied about it. Now it's just people who share DNA and have really complicated financial arrangements. Might as well make those arrangements official. You're punishing her. You're punishing Lily because you're mad at me. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm offering them money on very reasonable terms. Your own father would probably call this a sweet deal if he looked at it objectively, which he won't because that would require admitting I'm not the villain here. She made a sound that was half sob, half growl. What do you want from us? Seriously, what is it going to take for you to just let this go? I took a sip of whiskey, let it burn down my throat while I considered her question. What did I want? An apology would have been nice 2 weeks ago. An admission of guilt would have helped last week. At this point, I honestly didn't know anymore. You know what I want, Marlene? I want to protect my peace like it's a vintage Mustang. Because it took me 52 years to realize I actually have peace to protect, and I'm not letting anyone, family included, especially family, crash it because they think they're entitled to unlimited access to my patience and my wallet. That doesn't even make sense. It makes perfect sense. You just don't want to hear it. I hung up before she could respond, blocked her number, something I should have done days ago, but kept putting off because part of me still felt guilty about drawing boundaries with family, and poured myself another whiskey. Then I did something that felt both petty and absolutely necessary. I opened the family group chat. You know the one. Read Family Squad, with that stupid emoji of a house that Lily had chosen, where everyone posted inspirational quotes and photos of their meals and updates about their lives that nobody asked for, but everyone felt obligated to react to. I scrolled through the recent messages. Marlene had posted about some charity 5K she was doing. Lily had shared a selfie from her honeymoon planning. Patricia had sent one of those "good morning, blessed day" messages with approximately 40 emojis that made my eyes hurt just looking at them. Not a single mention of the wedding disaster. Not one, "Hey, maybe we should talk about what happened with Dad." Just business as usual, like I was supposed to forget about being humiliated and get back to being their cheerleader and ATM. I typed a message. "Hey everyone, just wanted to let you know I'm leaving the group chat. If you need to reach me, you have my actual phone number. Use it like adults who have something real to say. Jim." Then I clicked leave group before I could overthink it. My phone immediately started buzzing with individual texts. Marlene, Lily, even Patricia's ancient iPhone that she barely knew how to use. I didn't read any of them. Just turned off notifications, set my phone face down on the counter, and finished my whiskey in peace. The silence in my house felt different that night. Not lonely, not empty, just mine. No demands, no guilt trips, no carefully worded manipulation disguised as concern. Just me and my thoughts, and my excellent pan-seared chicken sitting heavy and satisfied in my stomach. I walked around my house taking inventory of things I'd been meaning to fix, but never had time for because I was too busy funding other people's dreams. The loose hinge on the bathroom door. The weird spot on the ceiling that probably indicated a slow leak. The back deck that needed staining. My garden that had become an overgrown mess, because who has time for hobbies when you're working overtime to pay for salmon dinners you don't get to eat? I made a list. Not a mental list, an actual list on paper, with a pen, like some kind of organized person who has their life together. House projects now that I'm not funding other people's poor decisions, I titled it, because even my to-do lists were getting sarcastic. The deck staining went at the top, then the bathroom hinge, then something I'd been putting off for 3 years. Converting the spare bedroom into an actual office instead of a storage unit for everyone else's junk that they'd come get eventually, but never did. I looked at that list and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Excitement. Not about some wedding or family gathering or obligation I had to fulfill, but about something for me. My space, my time, my choices. My phone buzzed again. Another text from someone who probably wanted to explain why I was wrong for having boundaries. I didn't check it. Instead, I cracked open my laptop and started browsing vacation destinations. Not fancy resorts or cruise ships, or anywhere that required me to dress nicely and pretend to have fun. Just quiet places. Mountains, maybe. Or some small beach town where nobody knew my name or expected anything from me, except maybe a decent tip at the local diner. I bookmarked about 7 different locations, made notes about which ones allowed dogs, because maybe I'd get a dog now that I wasn't constantly gone working overtime, and felt that peace settling deeper into my bones. Somewhere across town, my family was probably having an emergency meeting about my behavior, drafting their response to my group chat exit, coordinating their strategy for bringing me back into the fold. And here I was, researching dog-friendly cabins in the mountains and planning to stain my deck. If that wasn't a perfect metaphor for how our priorities had diverged, I don't know what was. I went to bed that night with my phone on silent, my doors locked, and my conscience clear. Tomorrow I'd start on that deck. Maybe call about getting an estimate for the office renovation. Possibly look into actual therapy, because apparently Connor thought I needed it, and the kid might be onto something. But tonight, I just enjoyed the calm, the quiet, the absence of drama. The calm before I blocked every single one of them and really committed to this whole protecting my peace thing. Because if there's one thing I'd learned from this entire disaster, it's that family doesn't get unlimited chances just because they're family. Eventually, even the most patient person runs out of access to give. And I was completely, totally, absolutely out. 2 weeks rolled by in what I can only describe as the most peaceful 14 days I'd experienced since before Lily was born. I stained that deck, took me a whole Saturday, got stain on my favorite jeans, and didn't regret a single second of it. The bathroom hinge got fixed in about 20 minutes, which made me realize I'd been listening to that squeak for 2 years when the solution literally cost $3 and required 1 screwdriver. I even started clearing out the spare bedroom, which turned out to be less spare bedroom and more archaeological dig site of my family's abandoned crap. Marlene's old exercise equipment that she used exactly twice before deciding Pilates wasn't her thing? Gone. Lily's boxes of high school stuff she swore she'd sort through soon back in 2019, sitting on the curb with a free sign. My mother-in-law's Christmas decorations that she stored at my house because you have so much more space, Jim. Returned via a very confused delivery service that probably wondered why someone was shipping Ceramic Angel COD. It felt good. Not just the physical cleaning, but the metaphorical purging of all the stuff, literal and emotional, that people had dumped on me over the years because I was too nice, too accommodating, too willing to be everyone's storage unit and emotional support animal. Then my birthday came around. 53 years old. Not a milestone birthday. Not one of those ages that ends in 0 or 5 that people make a big deal about. Just another year of being alive and apparently being the family disappointment for having standards. I woke up that morning half expecting something. Maybe a guilt-trip voicemail, possibly a passive-aggressive card in the mail. Definitely some kind of communication acknowledging that I'd successfully orbited the sun one more time. Nothing. Complete radio silence. My phone displayed exactly 0 notifications from family members, which was either the most peaceful birthday gift I'd ever received or the saddest commentary on the state of my relationships. Possibly both. I made myself coffee. Good coffee. Not the cheap stuff I used to buy because I was saving money for other people's expensive life choices, and sat on my newly stained deck watching the sunrise. That would look great, by the way. I'd picked this color called Cedar Ridge that made the whole deck look like something from one of those home improvement shows Marlene used to watch while giving me lists of projects she wanted done. My neighbor, Frank, waved from his yard where he was probably doing whatever retired people do at 6:30 in the morning. "Deck looks good," he called over. "Thanks. Did it myself. Happy birthday, by the way. You doing anything special?" I paused, coffee cup halfway to my mouth, genuinely surprised. Frank remembered my birthday. Frank, who I maybe talked to twice a month about weather and property lines, remembered my birthday. My own family. Crickets. Just keeping it low-key. I called back. Maybe grab some pizza later. Good man. Enjoy it. He went back to whatever he was doing. Looked like planting something. Probably those tomatoes he was always bragging about at the neighborhood barbecues I rarely attended because I was usually working overtime. I sat there thinking about how my neighbor, essentially a friendly stranger, had more consideration for me than my own daughter. That should have hurt more than it did. Instead, it just felt like confirmation of everything I'd already figured out over the past month. Around noon, the mail came. I walked down my driveway with my second cup of excellent coffee, enjoying the fact that I was still in my pajama pants at lunchtime because nobody was here to judge me, and opened my mailbox. Bills. Junk mail. A credit card offer addressed to current resident, which felt oddly appropriate given my current family status, and one envelope that looked suspiciously like a greeting card. I opened it right there at the mailbox, prepared for whatever manipulation was about to unfold. It was from Marlene. A birthday card. One of those generic ones from the drugstore that say "Happy Birthday" in gold foil letters, and have a stock photo of a sunset or a cake or something equally uninspired. Inside, she'd written, "Jim, we miss you. Things got out of hand, and I know we haven't handled everything perfectly, but this silence isn't helping anyone. Your family. That has to mean something. We should talk. Call me. Love, Marlene." I read it twice, looking for an actual apology hidden somewhere between the lines. Nope, just more of the same. Things got out of hand, as if events just happened spontaneously without anyone making deliberate choices. We haven't handled everything perfectly, which was possibly the understatement of the century, and this silence isn't helping anyone, which really meant your boundaries are inconvenient for us. No, I'm sorry. No, we were wrong. No, you didn't deserve to be treated like that. Just, we miss you, which I was pretty sure translated to, we miss your wallet and your willingness to accept whatever scraps we throw your way. The most insulting part? No signature from Lily. Marlene had sent a card on behalf of both of them without Lily actually contributing anything, which told me everything I needed to know about how much my daughter actually cared about repairing our relationship. I walked back to my house, card in hand, and did something that felt both petty and deeply satisfying. I opened my junk drawer. Every house is one, that catch-all repository of random crap that doesn't have a real home, and dropped the card in there, right next to expired coupons for oil changes, rubber bands that had lost their elasticity, and approximately 47 pins that probably didn't work. It landed with a soft flutter on top of what I realized was Marlene's previous letter, the one from a couple weeks ago with more of the same nonsense. The two pieces of correspondence sat there together, a matched set of half apologies and deflection, surrounded by literal garbage because that's apparently where my family's attempts at reconciliation belonged. I closed the drawer, poured myself a third coffee because birthdays mean you can have as much caffeine as you want, and made a decision. Today was going to be a good day, not because anyone was making it special, but because I was going to make it special for myself. I grabbed my keys, got in my SUV, my beautifully reclaimed SUV that still smelled faintly of Marlene's perfume, but I was working on airing that out, and drove to my favorite pizza place across town. The kind of place that's been there for 30 years, has grease stains on the menu, and makes pizza so good you don't care about your cholesterol. "Hey Jim," Tony called from behind the counter when I walked in. "Haven't seen you in a while." "The usual?" "Actually, Tony, it's my birthday. I want something special. What's the most ridiculous pizza you can make?" He grinned, that big Italian grin that made you feel like you just joined a family conspiracy. "Say no more. I got you." 20 minutes later, I walked out with a large pizza that was basically a heart attack waiting to happen. Extra cheese, 4 types of meat, jalapenos because why not, and some kind of garlic situation happening in the crust that Tony assured me was legendary. It cost about $40, which would have made old Jim hesitate because that's a lot for pizza. New Jim didn't even blink. New Jim had $37,500 extra dollars sitting in his account that wasn't going toward anyone's honeymoon unless they signed some paperwork. I drove home, parked in my driveway, and carried that pizza box inside like it was the Holy Grail. Set it on my coffee table, grabbed a beer from the fridge, a good beer, not the cheap stuff, and settled onto my couch. No plates, because it was my birthday, and I was an adult who could eat directly from the box if I wanted to. No napkins, just paper towels because they're more absorbent anyway. No family members asking for a slice or judging my choices or making comments about my health. Just me, Tony's legendary pizza, and whatever was on TV. Turned out to be a basketball game between two teams I'd never heard of, which was perfect because I didn't have to care about the outcome. I could just watch and eat and exist without anyone needing anything from me. Around the third slice, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again 5 minutes later. Same number. Voicemail again. By the fourth call, curiosity got the better of me, still my worst habit, and I answered. "Is this Jim Reed?" A woman's voice I didn't recognize. Depends on who's asking and whether they're trying to sell me something. She laughed. "I'm not selling anything. I'm Rachel, Lily's college roommate. We met at graduation a few years back. Anyway, I'm calling because I heard about what happened at the wedding and I just wanted to say, good for you." I almost dropped my pizza. "I'm sorry, what?" "Good for you," she repeated. "For walking out, for taking back your check, for not just rolling over and pretending it was okay. Lily called me crying about how you're ruining everything, and honestly, after she told me what actually happened, the badge thing, the seating, all of it. I told her she was lucky you only took back the check. My dad would have probably set something on fire. I laughed, a real laugh that came from somewhere deep. Your dad sounds like my kind of person. He is. Look, I know I'm probably overstepping, and I'm definitely not supposed to be calling you because Lily would kill me if she knew, but someone needs to tell you that you're not crazy. What they did was messed up. And this whole but family excuse everyone keeps using, that goes both ways. If Lily wanted you to act like family, maybe she should have treated you like family. We talked for about 15 minutes, her telling me stories about Lily in college that made me realize I really didn't know my daughter as well as I thought I did. Me explaining the whole saga from the badge to the car to the loan agreement. By the time we hung up, I had another person in my corner, another voice confirming that my expectations weren't too high and my boundaries weren't too rigid. I finished my pizza. Well, 5 slices of it. The rest would be tomorrow's breakfast because leftover pizza is one of life's great pleasures, and did something I'd been thinking about for weeks. I pulled out a notebook, one of those nice leather-bound ones that Lily had given me for Father's Day 3 years ago that I'd never used because it felt too fancy for my chicken scratch handwriting, and opened it to the first page. At the top, I wrote in my best handwriting, what I will and won't accept from family. Then I started a list. I won't accept being treated as an afterthought while being expected to be everyone's first priority. I won't accept exclusion disguised as complicated family dynamics. I won't accept half apologies that blame circumstances instead of acknowledging choices. I won't accept being someone's backup plan, emergency fund, or emotional punching bag. I kept writing, the list growing longer. Each line a boundary I should have drawn years ago, but was drawing now even if it felt late. Then I started the other column, what I would accept. I will accept genuine apologies that acknowledge specific wrongs. I will accept relationships built on mutual respect, not obligation. I will accept that some people won't understand my boundaries, and that's okay. And finally, I will protect my peace like it's a vintage Mustang, because it took years to rebuild, and I'm not letting anyone crash it again. I read through the list twice, added a few more items, then closed the notebook and set it on my coffee table where I could see it every day. A reminder that boundaries aren't walls, they're just gates, and I got to decide who had keys. My phone stayed quiet the rest of the night. No calls from Marlene, no texts from Lily, no group messages from extended family members wondering what was going on. Just silence. Beautiful, peaceful, birthday silence. I raised my beer toward the ceiling in a solo toast. To 53, I said to my empty living room. To no longer being a limited access guest in my own life. Then I drank to that, turned on a movie I'd been meaning to watch for months, and enjoyed the best birthday I'd had in years. Because it turns out, the best gift you can give yourself isn't something you buy. It's the permission to stop accepting less than you deserve. Even if, especially if, that means celebrating alone. I'd had enough of thinking, enough of analyzing, enough of replaying the wedding disaster in my head like some twisted highlight reel. So I did something I hadn't done in probably 15 years. I booked a solo trip. Not asking permission, not coordinating schedules, not making sure it was convenient for everyone else. Just me, a credit card that wasn't maxed out from funding other people's dreams, and a search engine pointed at quiet coastal towns nobody's heard of. I found a place called Crescent Bay, about 4 hours north. One of those tiny fishing villages that tourists haven't ruined yet, because there's no Starbucks or boutique hotels, just a handful of local restaurants, a pier that's seen better days, and exactly one motel that looked like it hadn't been updated since Reagan was president. Perfect. I packed a bag, left a note for Frank to water my tomatoes, and hit the road on a Wednesday morning because apparently when you're not working overtime to fund weddings, you have things like vacation days and free time. The drive itself was therapeutic, windows down, radio playing nothing but classic rock, no phone calls because I'd left my cell on airplane mode specifically to avoid whatever fresh drama was brewing back home. 2 months slid by like water, quiet and clean. I filled my calendar with things that mattered to me. Poker nights with Frank and his buddies who never asked me for money, golf on Sunday mornings, backyard barbecues where the only drama was whether the steaks were medium rare or medium. Real friends. Real peace. Then my phone buzzed. Lily's name lit up the screen. I miss you. I stared at those 3 words, remembering the badge, the lies, the silence on my birthday. Part of me, the old me, wanted to respond immediately, to fix things, to be the good dad who always came back. But I didn't type anything. Some silences are sacred. That night, I opened my leather notebook and reread my list. What I will and won't accept from family. Every boundary still felt right, still felt necessary. I poured myself a drink, raised my glass to the empty room, and said what I'd been needing to say for months. To me, no longer a limited access guest. Because the truth is, I didn't lose a family that night at the wedding. I just finally saw who was really behind the seating chart, and I reclaimed my own damn table.